Hello everybody! GGC Anime here, and today we're to review Kaiju No.8. So without further ado, let's just hop right into this. So what is the story of Kaiju No.8? Basically, we follow our main character Kafka Hibino, who, after working for so long on the Kaiju cleanup crew in a world that's filled with Kaiju that are constantly having to be exterminated, he ends up eating a Kaiju by accident. By accident, I mean it kind of shows up and shoves itself down his throat. And after that, he gains the ability to transform into a Kaiju and use his abilities to do what he wants. And yeah, basically the story follows him as, using these Kaiju powers, he aims to try to stand next to his best friend from his childhood and hoping to one day stand by her side and prove that he has what it takes to take down the Kaiju once and for all. And yeah, that wasn't a great description, but we're just gonna roll with it. So, in terms of spoiler-free thoughts, I absolutely love this anime. I think it's definitely one of the best type of action-esque anime I've watched recently. Like, I've seen a lot of shows where the action is really intense. I mean, heck, I recently just reached Wano in the One Piece anime, and the animation's already really good there. But I was very surprised to find that this show knew exactly what it needed to do in order to get me excited to see what was going to happen in the story, because they just did a fantastic job with the writing on this one, man. I absolutely love this anime. The story is incredible. The characters are great. I love so much about this. And I just had a really great time while watching. I just loved every single episode. The overall vibe was just right up my alley. I really liked it a lot. And it's really hard to say what I want to say without spoiling, but the basic way of kind of summarizing everything is that I really loved it. I absolutely loved the characters. Kafka as a protagonist is really fun to watch. I really appreciate how dedicated he is to try to make the world a safer place, as well as look out for those he cares about, and how far he is willing to go in order to show that he is Kafka Hibino, not just some kaiju. And he's really trying his best to improve as time goes on, and it's really great. I love it. And not only is Kafka a great character, but tons of the side casts that travel alongside him during this journey are also really great. Two of which I think stand out the most as some of the best characters in my opinion. Definitely have to go to the characters of Ichikawa and Kikuru, who both during the story have a lot of time to shine, and I really appreciate how much they grow throughout the season, especially Kikuru, who definitely goes through the most development throughout this whole season. And I really just enjoy how much they improve throughout the story and how much better they get. And overall, I just really think they are some of the best side characters to support Kafka along his journey to help wipe out the Kaiju. And it's great. I think that their connection with Kafka is great, especially his connection with his childhood friend, Mina, who is like the leader of this big defense force that could take out Kaiju. And I'm really excited to see where the story takes him next, since this season really has been a whole series of emotions that I absolutely love. And I'm very excited to see where the heck is gonna go next, because dude, this show knows exactly what it's trying to do. It's trying to create the hype, it's trying to make you really excited to see what's gonna happen next, and it also doesn't hold back anything to make sure the story gets as interesting as possible. And I'm 100% behind it because I am absolutely loving this anime. But yeah, now if I were to try to give some complaints, I guess, that I have about this show without diving into spoilers, it's really hard to do that because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be spoiled here. But I guess one thing I could kind of say that isn't really a spoiler, but is kind of a negative, is there are times in the story where they won't really go into much detail about specific things that I feel like we really should have gotten instead of just skipping to after they're done, which I can elaborate more on that in the spoiler section. But I definitely feel like, as a whole, Kaiju No.8 in just a few segments didn't really go into enough detail to help me really understand certain things, but it is what it is. Because still overall, I absolutely love the anime. I think that it does everything it needs to do, and it knows exactly what it's doing. And I'm not afraid to admit, even just watching halfway through the show, I've already started collecting the manga, because I really just want to see where the story goes next. Even though I think there is a season 2 in the works for Kaiju No.8, I honestly just want to read where the story goes next, because dude, it is so much fun. I absolutely love this series, and I just want to see what happens next. So I've already started collecting the manga. I'm 2 volumes in right now, and I'm very excited to get through the rest of the volumes and see what happens next, because dude, this series is great. I absolutely love it, and I'm really excited to see what happens next. But yeah, overall, I'd say this show is just a lot of freaking fun, and I'm very excited to see what sort of adventures Kafka will go on next, because dude, this season was an emotional roller coaster in a lot of ways, and even the weakest episodes of this season were still incredible. And I'm very excited to see where things go next. And yeah, that's all I can really say without spoiling anything, so we're just going to the spoiler section now. Here's the timestamps of the spoilers, and if you have seen the show, I recommend sticking around here my thoughts, but yeah, you skip to the end so you get any spoilers. But again, if you have seen it, I recommend sticking around here my thoughts. So yeah, I'm going to count up to 5, and I'm going to enter the spoiler section. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now we can talk about spoilers, and now I can actually kind of really go into details about stuff I really loved about this season. So first and foremost, I really enjoy how, despite the fact some of the characters have more basic personalities. I still think every single member of the cast has some charm to them, and I really do like that. Where even though characters might not be as relevant, like Iharu or Haruchi or Kaguragi, who all kind of just have their own little things going on throughout the story, it's kind of teased around that they might have some other stuff in their lives that's a bit more complicated, but we don't really dive too deep into them. But they still have their time to shine. And you also have Mina, who I thought was going to kind of be in the background of the story, that I figured, oh, she's just going to kind of be like Kafka's goal and they're only going to interact near the end. But no, she's actually pretty prominently talking to him throughout the story. Not like super prominently like, oh wow, they're talking all the time, but you could tell that they are consistently interacting with each other, and she doesn't try to shy away from the fact that she is his friend, though she doesn't do it in front of everyone, mainly just when the two of them are alone. She's like, okay, yeah, this is a friendship I remember, and I'm glad to see that you're making progress on catching up to me. Though it's not entirely like that. She does kind of try to make sure that he understands that he still needs to keep working, but I do like how they don't try to have her shy away from trying to interact with Kafka, which I very much appreciate. And I also appreciate how everyone is trying to give Kafka a chance. Even Kikoru's father is someone who originally was probably gonna try to exterminate Kafka, but then after hearing so many people defend him was just like, oh yeah, I guess I'll test him to see if he still has some humanity. And after that, after he sees that Kafka manages to have his humanity near the end of the show, which we'll talk about in a later bit, even he's just like, okay, yeah, I think we can use Kaiju No. 8 as a weapon instead of trying to kill him immediately. But yeah, going back though to earlier stuff, I guess I kind of want to talk about the story itself, because I do think that the story itself is quite interesting and how it goes about everything, because it doesn't just try to jump right into Kafka having his powers. At first, we dedicate a whole episode of him just being someone who's trying to dispose of kaiju bodies, and we still see, even then, he's still quite brave. Even though he ends up breaking some bones and other stuff and really trying to push himself to save Ichikawa, he's clearly still a good dude. And then the episode just ends with him accidentally eating the kaiju after a kind of like, well, not really kaiju, but like this monster worm thing that just crawls into his mouth and then makes him transform to a kaiju. And then we have the next episode, which dedicates to him using these powers to save people. It was a really interesting batch of episodes, and I really enjoyed them. And then we get kind of a confusing part where all of a sudden it's been like a small time skip and Kafka already knows how to use his powers, which I was not a big fan of. I was really hoping we get to see him try to learn to control his powers, but then he just kind of has a fairly good understanding of it already. Not perfectly, like he still transforms sometimes by accident, but nothing to a massive degree. He's overall able to use it pretty nicely, which I had a bit of a problem with for a little bit, where I was just thinking, oh man, we're not going to see him try to develop those powers, dang. But I moved past it real fast because, dude, so much of the season is phenomenal. Especially with how Kafka, whenever he's trying to save people, you just have this epic soundtrack that's playing, and every time it just gets you so hyped to see just Kafka just go out there and take anything down with a punch, and it's so good, and it's so amazing, and I love it so much. And despite the fact he's trying so hard to keep his identity a secret, it's just not working, because he literally reveals it to Kikoru almost immediately after the whole test to enter the Force starts. But then after that, he keeps it a secret for a little while until later on, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, I think the show does an awesome job at really trying to get you hyped for stuff. And the fact that I don't really have too much to say about the overall story isn't really because it's not like there isn't stuff to say. It's more so the fact that it's really hard to kind of say, oh man, this thing and that thing were great, because all of it really plays into the part of it was all just really good. Like, it's really hard to go into details about how the entire story plays out, because it plays out in such a simple manner where, even though it's super enjoyable and I love it a lot, it's kind of more of a straight line where it's not too easy to describe everything without going into massive detail on it, but it's also so jam-packed that if I tried to describe the whole story, it would literally lead to me basically just telling you what happens in each and every episode, which I don't really want to dive too deep into each and every episode themselves. But I really did enjoy a lot of these episodes, and I found myself just loving every single one. I tuned in every week because I just thought, oh man, this episode will just maybe be a good episode, maybe a bad, we'll see. And then I end up loving every single episode. In fact, the first time I ever felt slightly bored watching an episode was, funny enough, episode 11, where Kafka finally gets captured and stuff like that, which again, we'll go over in a little bit. But that episode, while I wouldn't say it was as entertaining as the rest, it was still a very good episode, and the ending of it is just phenomenal. Like, I think it is some of the best Kaiju No. 8 content. Even though the whole thing was only about 2 minutes, it still got me very excited for what was to come in episode 12, which was just as good as the rest, because dude, this show knew exactly how to get you hyped up for everything, because it was just so good at that writing. But yeah, overall, I definitely think that there are so many charming things about this show, and while I know I'm not going into much detail about any of them, I just love it, especially with how there are clear struggles going on for multiple characters. Like how I mentioned some of the other characters before don't make as much of an impact, but still have their part in the story. Like how Haruchi has a bit of a awkward relationship with his dad that we might kind of evolve on further, and we have to see where that goes. And we also have Ihuru, who's trying to kind of form a rivalry with Ichikawa, and it's interesting how that plays out since, you know, Ichikawa's just kind of working hard to make sure he can take down Kaiju. Meanwhile, Ihuru is trying so hard to be a rival, and Ichikawa's just kind of doing his own thing, which was really funny. And I just appreciate the fact that we get to see these characters have their own little personality quirks that really add to them, even if they are more basic kind of tropes you'd see with a lot of characters that are put on the side to kind of just be something else to have the writer write about later on. I still think that the role they played was very nice, and I also really appreciate the fact that after they learn about the kaiju secret from Kafka, they don't try to be like, oh man, he was a kaiju this whole time, I hated that guy. Instead, they're like, no, he saved our lives. Why would we be mad about that? He saved us. Which, once again, I'll talk about in a little bit, but first there's one more thing I want to discuss, which is slightly more of a negative, but not really, because I'm sure it will become more relevant in the next season or the next batch of volumes. But the last thing I kind of want to complain about is how I'm kind of disappointed with how little the kind of main villain of this story, as of right now. There's probably a bigger villain down the line, but right now we have one major villain who's been hyped up, and that is Kaiju number 9, who's built up to be this really dangerous threat, one that even Kafka kind of struggles against. Well, to a certain extent, not entirely, but basically he actually gives Kafka a bit of trouble. And I was wondering, man, what role is he gonna play in this? What role will Kaiju number 9 really play a role in this story? And then he kind of just does his own thing for the rest of the season. He kind of just goes off to do his own thing and is preparing for the next big problem, which I assume might be relevant in season 2 or further on somewhere down the timeline. We'll have to see. But I definitely feel like it was a bit disappointing to not see more of Kaiju number 9, but for what we got, it was still good. It was still very good, and I really am excited to see what kind of threat he'll be in the future. I'm very excited to see that, but yeah. But moving past that, it's time to talk about the one thing I've been wanting to discuss this whole time, and that is Kafka's reveal to be Kaiju number 8. Now, when at first he decided he was going to keep his identity a secret, I thought maybe it was going to be something they'd drag out throughout the series where he would constantly find excuses to not show off his kaiju form to people, and it would just kind of be something nobody would ever find out. But then near the end of this season, in order to save everyone from a giant massive bomb, he transforms in front of everyone and takes out the bomb, and after that gets arrested and stuff. And it kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I was just thinking, wait, he revealed it? He revealed it to everyone? I thought we were going to drag this out for a while, like at least 2 to 3 seasons. What do you mean he already revealed it? And it was shocking. I was legitimately surprised that they didn't drag this out as much as they did. I thought there were either going to be 2 ways they would go about this. Either A, they would slowly have everybody learn about it one by one, and then when everybody learned about it, everyone else already knew about it, so it wasn't really a big surprise, or he would hold off on revealing that much to anyone for a long time. So having it just happen right here at this moment really shocked me, and I was all for it, because after that we get a really good storyline that I'll discuss in a moment. But that moment where they are fighting against a big, massive, dangerous kaiju that they labeled Kaiju number 10, and then Mina ends up taking it out with some help from the second in command, Hoshina, who we get his whole backstory where he's someone who's more skilled with using bladed weapons instead of guns, so people were thinking he wouldn't make it very far, but then Mina actually saw his potential, which was really good. But that was, as a whole, just a really good setup for his character as well. And the fact that he actually put some trust into Kafka because of his abilities of understanding kaiju due to having to clean them out so much before he joined the defense force, it really shows that this man really does try his best in order to do things for the good of humanity, because he sees the potential. And sure, he also makes the joke about how he thinks that Kafka is just a funny dude, which he's right, but he did see some potential in Kafka, and that ended up blinding him from thinking that he was Kaiju number 8 simply because he didn't want to accept that reality. But once he realizes it, he doesn't try to back away from it, and even says, we need Kaiju number 8 on our side here. He would help a lot with taking down the other kaiju, and it was just really good. Like, the whole thing where every single member of that group, the entire, like, I think it was like group 3, I think they were called, or something like that. Basically, everyone in that group were all just like, dude, this guy saved all of our lives. You can't tell me that he's not a good guy. And while there were some excuses that could be made for why he saved their lives, we all know that really is just because Kafka has a really big heart and he really cares about people. And that's shown in the next 2 episodes, because the next 2 episodes are all about what to do with Kaiju number 8 now that they knew his identity. And what happens there is Kikuru's father, who, as I mentioned before, was trying to understand Kafka, decided to fight him, and ended up leading towards this whole fight between them where Kafka was trying his best to not hurt Kikuru's father, and while he was doing that, he was trying his best to defend himself as well. But Kikuru's father ended up bringing out these special kaiju weapons that he got from something they labeled as Kaiju No.8, and it really pushed Kafka to his limits to the point that the kaiju form of him actually took over. And when that happened, well, most of the episode I was just kind of iffy about because it was just mainly people trying to tell Kafka it's okay, we'll see you back here soon enough, which was good, but it went on for a bit longer than I had expected it to, so I was waiting for something big to happen. But then you get to the last 2 or so minutes when, while Hikaru's dad is fighting Kafka, eventually it gets to such a bad state where Kafka's in so much danger that the kaiju form just takes over and just becomes a full-on kaiju and is slowly starting to kill Kikuru's dad as he's just tossing him around, just throwing him around and beating him to a pulp. And then you just see Kikuru on the side screaming out how she doesn't want Kafka to lose his sanity, or mainly she's just kind of screaming out his name. But it is just so good, and it is just phenomenal, especially with how you see inside of the kaiju, Kafka is trying to get control back, but is struggling. And then, right when it looks like things are gonna go for the worst, then Kafka remembers his past promises with Mina and stuff, and that pushes him forward to take control back of his kaiju form, and ends up almost killing himself because he literally said that if he ever lost control of his kaiju form, he would take his own life and stuff like that. But then, because he managed to recover from everything thanks to medical people watching over him, it was decided by Kikuru's father to basically say, yeah, I think we should use him as a weapon, send him back to his team or stuff, though they're all splitting up to different teams because their base was destroyed. But he's just like, yep, send him out there. We're gonna get him on the field. We need someone like him out there on the field, which was really nice, and it was just an absolutely fantastic ending to the season as it teases what might be happening next in future seasons. And yeah, that was all awesome. It was freaking amazing. Like, throughout the entire season, never once did I find myself getting bored in the slightest. There wasn't a single episode, besides maybe episode 11, which even then it was still a very, very good episode, where I was thinking, okay, this episode's a bit weaker than the rest. Like, that thought almost never occurred to me besides that one episode, which, as I said, is still a very, very good episode. I still think it was very good. It just dragged out for a bit longer than I anticipated. But even though that was the case, I still very much enjoyed it, and every single episode of the show is fantastic. I loved it, and I'm just so excited to see where things go next. And yeah, overall, I very much enjoyed Kaiju No.8, and I'm very excited to see where the story goes in the future. And yeah, that's all I have to say. So we're at the conclusion of this video. What are my final thoughts? Overall, I very much like Kaiju No.8. It's a fun show with a lot of great comedy, characters, and a really interesting story that I'm very excited to see where things go with it. And yeah, I really liked it. That's why I give Kaiju No.8 a 9 out of 10. Now, you might be thinking I would have said an 8 out of 10 to make a reference to the show, or a 10 out of 10 because of how much I've hyped it up throughout my review, but no, 9 out of 10 simply because of the few minor complaints I had, and even then, the 9 is just barely hitting that 10 out of 10 almost. It's so close to hitting that 10 out of 10, but just a little bit lower, but still very much enjoyed this show, and I liked it a lot. And yeah, that's all I have to say, and thank you all for watching. If you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe as we do anime fans to the channel, and I will see you all around. Peace!